There is this novel, actually an anthology, called the Bible. Now, I'm not into fantasy all that much, but the Bible novel seems to have picked up a cult following, so it kind of piqued my interest. And you would not believe how seriously the fanboys and fangirls take this book. In fact, a couple of Bible fanboys came to my house and asked me if I'd read it. They said most people didn't understand the plot correctly and asked if I'd like them to explain it to me. And here I had thought the Star Wars fanboys were fanatics. So I thought I'd officially seen the proverbial everything. Then, one Saturday morning, two elderly ladies, who looked like they could have been somebody's great-great-grandmothers, came by. Turned out they were fangirls of the Bible novel, and even they wanted to make sure I'd read it and understood the plot. They even claimed they were witnesses of the Bible's main character. I don't know. So yeah, I've been hearing about it for a while now, and when I saw it was out in paperback, I thought I'd give it a read. Who knows, the Bible anthology might have been a good book. I just finished the first novella. It's called Genesis. I think the author's supply of pot was laced with military-grade hallucinogens because talk about psychedelic stupidity. Anyway, the Genesis novella starts off when this deranged creature named Yahweh, he's also called God, builds and then terraforms a planet. Once he finishes up, he makes a figurine of a man out of some dirt, and then breathes on it, and the dirt man comes to life, kind of like that old story about the gingerbread man. Yahweh names his dirt man Adam. Now, to each his own, not judging what sexual fantasies get the Bible fanboys off, but the Genesis novella next gets into some erotica. Yahweh tries to get the dirt man Adam to have sex with an animal. Any animal. And to get him aroused, Yahweh parades animal after animal in front of Adam. Genesis is a little unclear whether Adam actually gives bestiality a try, but at least he refuses to marry one of them like Yahweh had planned. And what does this Yahweh person decide to do? He tears off a piece of the dirt man Adam and makes a dirt woman named Eve. I guess she's kind of like one of those inflatable women that sex toy shops sell, only made through vivisection and cloning instead of plastic. Come to think of it, Eve was built out of a piece of Adam, so I guess his having sex with her is a sort of augmented masturbation. Whatever the case, given the way Yahweh treats Eve, it is clear that Adam's relationship with her goes against nature as Yahweh had intended. After all, God initially created Adam and Steed, not Adam and Eve. It turns out Yahweh invented the dirt people just to have someone to suck up to him, to tell him how absolutely glorious he is, and most importantly, to perfectly obey his slightest whim. Now we get to the stupid part. This Yahweh God Lord person, whatever else he might be, is really, really stupid. Case in point, he decides the best way to get the dirt people to suck up to him nice and hard is to give them a choice. They can either remain as dumb as dirt and suck up to him for all eternity, or be able to think for themselves and die. Well, Adam and Eve, since they still have dirt for brains, don't know how to decide, so this talking serpent thing whispers the correct answer to them. And surprise, surprise, Adam and Eve choose the ability to think for themselves. Unfortunately, Yahweh is a lot like that magic kid in that old Twilight Zone episode who puts everyone who displeases him into a graveyard that he calls the cornfield. Yahweh never gets over Adam and Eve choosing intelligence over sucking up to him. So, furious and terrified that the dirt people can now think for themselves, Yahweh curses them, evicts them from their home, makes their lives a living hell, and re-engineers their bodies so they will die. After that, Yahweh becomes, I don't know, a sort of dim-witted Dark Lord. Nevertheless, Adam and Eve aren't too unhappy because they have discovered sex. And since the author of the Genesis novella didn't see any other use for women, Eve starts popping out dirt babies. A few generations later, the whole planet is infested with them. Yahweh decides it's time to fix the dirt people so they will suck up to him the way he so ineptly intended. What does he do? Make a new model of dirt people? Nope. Yahweh, the dim-witted Dark Lord, decides to dissolve all but 8 of the dirt people. Why he thought that would help, the Bible doesn't say. Like I said, this Yahweh God Lord person is exceedingly stupid. And, sure enough, dissolving almost all the dirt people doesn't help. After that, Genesis kind of drops the whole dirt people thing, and thereafter they are just ordinary flesh people, except they live ridiculously long. So, what is Yahweh's next attempted solution for getting people to praise him and sycophantically tell him he is ever so awesome and virile and all that? Don't even try to guess. You couldn't come up with it in a billion lifetimes. Like I said, Genesis reads like the author was stoned out of his mind. And so this is what he does. And I'm not kidding, this is actually the next thing. Yahweh decides he will reprogram humanity's mind. And does he finally put in an app so the people will worship him in just the way he likes? No. He installs a computer virus-like thing into their brains that causes them all to speak different languages so they can't talk to each other. Why he thinks that's going to help him get the nearly sincere adoration he seeks, you tell me. But, by no surprise whatsoever, the language scrambling caper doesn't work either. Everything else he has tried having failed, Yahweh, the deranged God person, comes to what he thinks will solve all his problems. What is this awesome plan, you might ask? He looks around for a psychotic sycophant who's willing to chop up his son just on Yahweh's say-so. And wouldn't you know it, the only psycho-sycophant willing to do it, his name is Abraham, is big on incest, having married none other than his half-sister. Abraham takes his son, who is also his nephew, far away where he won't be caught, and starts to disembowel his son/nephew. But Yahweh saves the inbred child at the last minute and rewards Abraham for attempted filicide by promising, but not giving, Abraham vast swaths of land. And then Yahweh arranges for Abraham to have a bunch of inbred grandchildren. Genesis next gets into some rather dull, dysfunctional family intrigue, with more inbreeding and Yahweh randomly murdering people, which seems to be his favorite hobby. The Genesis novella isn't clear whether the inbreeding program is going to get Yahweh a bountiful supply of sycophants, because what does Yahweh, the stupidest Dark Lord ever imagined, do next? He creates a famine and forces the whole clan of his inbred people off the very land he had, just a few chapters earlier, promised Abraham that his grandchildren could keep forever. So on that boring cliffhanger, with Yahweh, the dim-witted Dark Lord, having utterly failed at everything he has ever tried, other than killing people, Genesis finally comes to an end. We have to read the sequel, called Exodus, to find out what happens next. Honestly, I don't see how the Bible novel got the cult following it did. But what really surprises me is that with all the bestiality and inbreeding, why there are sweet old grannies who are such fangirls. For me personally, Genesis is the stupidest thing I have ever read. But then again, the Bible is an anthology, so maybe some of its other novellas are even stupider. So that's my review of Genesis, the first novella in the Bible novel. I will review Exodus in another video. This is Keith. Go read a good book. Hint, good book is not something I would call the Bible novel.